Is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this resolution that prioritizes tax cuts for billionaires over the well-being of hardworking American families and the livelihoods of our nation's farmers. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program is our nation's most effective anti-poverty tool and a key part of the Farm Bill, which Republicans want to cut by $230 billion. This would cause millions of hardworking Americans to suffer, including some of the most vulnerable in our communities, children, seniors, and the disabled. Decimating SNAP in this way would break up the coalition that is critical to passing a bipartisan farm bill and hurts the entire food supply chain when times are tough in farm country and in many communities, especially rural communities across this country. Right now, as people across our nation are struggling with the high cost of groceries, SNAP helps American families keep food on the table. And let's be clear about what we're talking about. $6 a day for people in need. $6 to those who qualify. SNAP reduces childhood poverty, improves health outcomes, and generates hundreds of thousands of jobs throughout the food supply chain. Because when you spend $1 on food, you aren't just paying for the food in your cart. You're helping to pay for the salary of the grocery store clerk who stocked the shelves, the trucker who delivered the food to the store, the manufacturer who produced the packaging, and the farmer who grew it. The future of a bipartisan farm bill, which our farmers desperately need, is in Republican hands today. If you cut SNAP to pay for tax cuts for your wealthy donors, it's on you. I urge my colleagues to vote no. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm actually stunned as we stand here today because as my colleagues talk about their plan, what they're doing in reality is giving billionaires the national credit card and telling them to go hog wild, racking up $14 trillion in national debt over the next 10 years so that large corporations can pay less in taxes. That doesn't lower costs for middle-class families in this country. If this was a bill that we were talking about that would lower taxes for the middle class, I'd be all for it. But to make matters worse, part of how they want to pay for this bill is to cut the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, by $230 billion. This cut would force the average SNAP household of 4 to spend over $2,000 more on food. And who are the majority of SNAP recipients? They are seniors living on fixed incomes, children, and disabled people. SNAP helps American families buy American-grown food. And this cut takes a chunk out of the farm economy as well, when they can least afford it because of the whiplash of this administration and Donald Trump's tariffs. This bill would mean that farmers growing our food would make $30 billion less than anticipated in farm income, placing family farmers at risk. Look, this Republican budget only stands to make America hungrier and poorer so the rich can get richer.
Gentleman's time's expired.
And I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania Reserve. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, President Trump, he changes his tariff policy more than most people change their socks. One day he's picking fights with Canada and Mexico, our friends, and the next day he's launching a global trade war. And today he's pausing tariffs on some countries while also increasing them on China. What our farmers, ranchers, and producers need is certainty. I don't know how my Republican colleagues can say what they're saying. Any of this is all according to plan with a straight face. There is no plan. There is no art of the deal. Trump's reckless tariffs are costing hardworking Americans $4,600 a year, hurting small businesses, and absolutely tanking retirement savings. Farmers are taking losses on days they go to market only to turn around and see conditions improve a few hours later because of a tweet from the president. How is that strategic? Trump alienated our trade partners, destroyed our credibility as a country that foreign governments can do business with us. And House Republicans are acting as his rubber stamp by banning the House from taking action to stop it. We need an adult in the room, and I cannot find a single one on the other side of the aisle because this president's tantrums are causing economic global panic. The House must be able to debate and vote on these tariffs. You have the same farmers I do coming through your offices right now to tell you it's not just the tariffs, it's the uncertainty of the tariffs and the disappearing markets. Doing nothing allows American families to be crushed by these reckless tariffs. I urge my colleagues to vote to defeat the previous question. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady from North Carolina.
Reserve.
She reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I will yield now to the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee, who's going to talk about the SNAP cuts.
Well, thank you so much. It's certainly an honor to be able to stand with my colleagues here today, and an honor, Leader Jeffries, to be able to stand up for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program in this country. You know, my Republican colleagues, as you all know, have indicated that they want to cut $230 billion from the SNAP program. Doing that would roll back, just think about this for a minute. The SNAP program provides $6.20 on average to hungry Americans. That would roll that back to $5 at a time when the nation's food costs are out of control, and the president and this administration promised that this would be their #1 priority. This hasn't even risen to any priority within this administration. Now, the Ag Committee, my majority, and Chairman Thompson, they keep hoping and praying that the Senate will save them. Folks, the Senate's not going to save you. This committee is actually going to be asked, I believe, next week to cut more than $230 billion, because now they want to roll essentially part of the Farm Bill into reconciliation, which means they're going to have to cut even more from SNAP in order to achieve this. So let me be clear about all of this. Many of the ideas coming out of Republicans on this committee, just a 10% cost share, if they choose to move in that direction, is a $400 million a year hit to the state of Pennsylvania. It is $4.27 billion over the next 10 years. So my colleagues, they truly have a choice here. They've said that they don't want to cut SNAP benefits. And truly, I believe that Chairman Thompson does not want to. But I also believe that Chairman Thompson is going to be rolled by Republican leadership, is going to be rolled by the White House. If this administration truly cares about family farmers, let me tell you this. Cutting SNAP by $230 billion is a direct cut of $30 billion to farm income in our country. And that doesn't even include the money that goes into SNAP for the truck drivers who drive the food to the stores, the retailers, and especially in rural communities across our country who sell that food, and of course, the hungry Americans and Minnesotans who rely on that, which are principally 70% veterans, seniors, and children in our country. And by the way, SNAP already has work requirements. So do not allow my Republican colleagues to try to characterize this as anything but taking food out of the mouths of hungry children in our country. I have 4 Republicans in Minnesota, 4 Republican congressmen and women. Last week, I decided that I would go around the state of Minnesota and I would do town halls in each of their Republican districts. And I can tell you cuts to Medicaid and cuts to SNAP were 2 of the most concerning issues that their constituents raised to me because they won't show up and do their own town hall. So I say to you, I'm not looking for 4 Republicans in this country. I'm looking for 4 patriots in this country. 4 Republicans. That's all we have to find. And folks, if we can't find 4 patriots left in our nation to put their money where their mouth is and sign on to this discharge petition, then that is a truly sad day in America and a truly sad day for the Republican Party. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Leader Jeffries for comments.
Thank you. Many of the Republican lawmakers who have expressed skepticism or criticism about the current potential cuts to, through the E&C committee, they have still, admitted they're open to some sorts of cuts. Are there members that you think you can talk with to sign this who are open to no cuts? Like, is that a viable path, finding 4 people who are open to signing this? Because most have said they're open to some sort of cut.
Yes, you have members, including one in New York, in the Westchester suburbs, who has said clearly and unequivocally he's not going to support any cuts to Medicaid benefits. Well, the easiest way to make sure that happens is to sign this discharge petition so that there's an up or down vote on the hands-off Medicaid and SNAP legislation, which takes an existing law, the 1974 Budget Empowerment and Control Act, with an existing provision related to Social Security, and simply extends that to Medicaid and SNAP.
Can I just say something? I guess I'm getting a little angry. We're talking about Medicaid cuts, right? And we're saying you're no longer going to be eligible for your health insurance. What does that mean, right? It means I can't go see a doctor. I have to go to the emergency room if I get sick. And then what happens, right? That becomes uncompensated care. That person gets sicker. Ultimately, the federal government ends up paying more, and you have a sicker society. We're talking about real people here and real lives. This is just, they can play all the numbers they want and say this is what this adds up to. The bottom line is it's going to make this country sicker, and it's going to mean more cost to the federal government or the state or to the other people that have health insurance. They're going to have to make up the difference for the uncompensated care. So these numbers game belies the reality of what happens when people lose their health insurance and their Medicaid.
I just wanted to mention, since rural development falls into the jurisdiction of the Ag Committee, folks are very concerned about the outsized impact in rural communities across our country to these Medicaid cuts, because a higher proportion of folks who live in rural communities across our country have Medicaid as their primary coverage. And so we are seeing inside our congressional office and inside the committee a revolving door of healthcare organizations coming through to tell us that there is going to be a drastic impact on rural hospitals if, in fact, these Medicaid cuts come through. And it's going to cause not just cuts to Medicaid, folks, but all healthcare costs are going to go up, as Frank said, if Medicaid is cut by $880 billion. And in a scenario where we're literally talking about cutting food security for people and health care for people, how in the world is this going to make America healthy again? This is only going to make America sicker, and it's only going to hit the pocketbooks of Americans even more. So all of my Republican colleagues who represent incredibly rural districts across our country because of the mass gerrymandering in our nation, I have been talking to them and telling them publicly and privately that you really do have no idea the long-term impact in your communities. So many jobs in these rural communities come from our local hospitals and healthcare systems. This is going to be a shockwave through rural communities if they move forward with these plans.
Thank you. Last question.
Yeah, I just want to. My time has expired. Now recognize the gentlelady from Minnesota, ranking member, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Over the past several months, I've met dozens of family farmers and producers across this country. They've represented operations of all different types and sizes. Despite their many differences, there was a common theme between all these meetings: the lack of certainty. Every farmer, grower, rancher, and producer has said that they need more certainty. And despite this administration's promise to put farmers first, we've seen that many of the actions are actually harming them. We've seen trade wars increase instability in farm country and surrender market access to our competitors like Brazil. We've seen USDA programs that farmers rely on for income frozen or eliminated with little to no explanation. And on the ground in districts like mine, local FSA, NRCS, and Forest Service staff are being let go. Wait lists are getting longer, and fewer USDA staff are available to help family farmers navigate the agency's incredibly popular and impactful programs. And the administration wants to gut a title of the Farm Bill in reconciliation. I've got 3 questions, so I may have to reclaim my time during some of your answers because I want to make sure to get to all of them. Let me start by asking about the agency, Madam Secretary. Before the department moved forward with its layoffs restructuring plan, did the department carefully analyze what these folks did and the impact these cuts would have on farm country?
Well, thank you, ma'am, and certainly had a great visit to your state, a sugar beet farm recently. The bottom line is this, that no one has been fired. There were 15,000 USDA employees who took the resignation, the deferred resignation, but no one was fired. So I think that's really important. In a normal year, madam, we'll have 8,000 to 10,000 attrition rate. So while I think there's been a big narrative about how all these important people have been fired, that was not the case. What we have done, and yes, to answer your question, is a very careful review. Yesterday in the Oval Office, we talked about our wildland firefighters. They're at 96% full, meaning we are ahead of where the Joe Biden USDA was last year at this time to prepare for wildfire season. To your point on the FSA offices, what I have asked every member to do, and I know you have my cell phone, I welcome every member, Republican or Democrat, to call me directly with specific examples, and we can get on that right away, because that forward-facing part of USDA with our rural communities and with our farmers is of priority to me.
Thank
so
you.
if you could help us solve for that,
Thank you. I'm going to go to my second question. Thank you so much. Look, just to be clear, if you had reviewed this, you would have made sure that folks who are trying to stop bird flu in our country weren't allowed to retire. In fact, I ran a big business for a lot of years before I came to Congress, and voluntary retirement's often exactly the wrong people retire. That's why you take a more thorough review of these things before you just say everybody who wants to retire, retire. But nonetheless, let's go on to trade. 40% of my district is covered in corn and soy every summer. Since we're losing market access in China, what markets are you targeting to help U.S. soy producers compensate for the market access that they have lost?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and I know in your comments you mentioned the farmers in trade and the uncertainty, and we certainly realize that. We are very aggressively, specifically on our row croppers, but to soy, for example, really working to expand the markets. Last week I was in Italy. Interestingly, Italy, of course, the government of Giorgia Meloni is very aligned with President Trump. They are very open, but Italy, again, as an example, imports about $75 billion in agriculture products. Only $1.7 billion comes from our American farmers and ranchers, and this is one of our best friends around the world. So we had great conversations specific to soy on how we get, which is the #1 import, but not nearly enough, how we get more of that into Italy, into the EU, into Japan, into India, into
Madam
Vietnam.
Secretary, I'm sorry,
we'll
I've got 40
to
seconds. I'm going to reclaim my time. And
Yes,
China
ma'am.
represents 50% of the U.S. soybean market. Wouldn't it, I'm not going to ask, but I believe it would have been a better strategy to go get these markets before you do an across-the-board trade war that decimates 50% of the market.
About
that's
1
not a
hour ago,
question.
the president announced a deal with China, so that is being solved.
And then last question really is about HPIA. Do you support, look, I've got a bunch of turkey growers in Minnesota. Don't even get me started on the Maha report, Secretary Kennedy. Do you support developing a robust vaccine strategy, and will you commit to using vaccines to combat animal disease?
We are looking at all of the above. We have $100 million committed. We have 417 applications, Ranking Member Craig, that we are currently working through. Vaccines, therapeutics, we're looking at everything across the board.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Now,
Lady yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Craig from Minnesota.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for allowing me to wave on to this committee today. I think if I were a permanent member, I'd have a permanent headache.
Well, you won't have to worry about it, but
Governor
go ahead.
Walz, it is so good to see you today. Let me start by saying that we should all be against chaos. We all are for a safe and secure border and an orderly immigration system. What we're seeing now, though, is chaos out of the current administration with their blatant disregard for due process and their indiscriminate immigration executive orders. In fact, the Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security had to take down its posted sanctuary jurisdictions list because it created mass confusion in Minnesota for local officials and was opposed by local law enforcement. And so, Governor Walz, let me just start, just so we know the record is correct. I didn't think Minnesota was a sanctuary state. Is Minnesota a sanctuary state, Governor?
We are not. The legislature has passed no such law, and I have signed no such law, and we follow all federal law.
Thank you, sir. That list included 20 counties when it came out across Minnesota without any rhyme or reason, including LeSueur County, which I represent. I've inquired into why they are listed from DHS, but still absolutely no answers. Governor Walz, I thought it might be helpful to point out that according to the FBI's own 2023 data, Minnesota has fewer violent incidents per 100,000 than states such as Tennessee, Louisiana, Missouri, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, I'm going to repeat that again, Georgia, and Ohio. Why do you think that our state has been able to maintain a lower crime rate than other states?
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. And we are at a 30-year low on serious crimes, and as you said, we consistently rank below. And I think that's because we invest, as we have, historic investments in law enforcement, but law enforcement works with the community. There's a process in place. We know who they are. They work hand in hand. We make sure that those laws are followed, and we also have policies where we show compassion to our neighbors. And it's not chaos, as you said. It's done right. So I am grateful for the law enforcement who does that work, but I'm also grateful to the legislature and my administration who have put in historic amounts of help to make sure they're able to deliver those services. And they are the ones that are best trained to do it. And the case that you brought up of listing these, in Minnesota, counties can go above the federal floor. If they want to issue detainers, they certainly can. Many of those counties that were listed on there would fit the definition of everyone on this side of the aisle is asking for, and they're doing that. Nothing prohibits them in Minnesota from doing that, and yet they ended up on the list. It caused great chaos, and law enforcement themselves, and as you heard earlier, Sheriff's Association issuing, that they can't be done this way.
Thank you, Governor. Earlier today, I spoke with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and I think all of us here share the goals of lowering costs for our constituents and growing the economy. According to a Minnesota Chamber Foundation report from this February, Minnesota's immigrant labor force participation rate was over 74%, well above the national average. And they fill important jobs in our agriculture, healthcare, and manufacturing sectors. Governor Walz, how can we ensure Minnesota remains a state to attract the talent we need and a strong economy?
We invest in our people. We make sure we remain the #1 healthcare state. We make sure that people are safe in their communities. We talk about focusing on the work that the State Patrol keeps our roads safest. Top 3 state for the lowest number of traffic accidents. That's what they should be focusing on. Investing, and as the Chamber is focusing on, Minnesota's #4 in Fortune 500 per capita, and we were ranked 6th best state for business. Continue to have a well-educated, a healthy, safe, and make sure we're investing in those opportunities for people. That's all we're asking, and we're asking that the federal government do their job. You continue to ask states to do ICE job. They are free to do their job in Minnesota, but they're asking us to do the job when we're doing everything we can to help, but we have all of the other responsibilities of educating, of public safety, of roads, of transportation, of water infrastructure. And that's why Minnesota remains a top state, because we invest in our people, we invest in their growth, we invest in their families.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate this. And Mr. Lynch, I'll yield last 20 seconds to you if you've got that.
Thank you. I'm happy to take that. Thank you very much, Representative. For this 12 seconds, I just want to read This is from the Minnesota Reformer from February 12th, 2025. The sanctuary bill that was offered in the Minnesota legislature is already dead, as House Speaker says it doesn't have the votes. So this was an attempt to actually make Minnesota a sanctuary state, and it, like the Speaker said, didn't have the votes and died very early in the process.
And we got to the business of balancing our budget and investing in all of the other things we needed to do.
Gentlemen, ladies, time's expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Miller from Illinois.
Gentleman from Kentucky reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Congresswoman Craig.
Gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor two incredible Minnesotans and friends who were taken from us too soon. Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark Hortman. We lost Melissa and Mark 2 weekends ago in an unthinkable, politically motivated attack that also threatened the lives of State Senator John Hoffman, his wife Yvette, and their daughter Hope. Like many Minnesotans, I've struggled to come to terms with this tragedy, to make sense of it. But I found comfort in community and in sharing stories of my friends, Melissa and Mark. So today, I'd like to remember the Hortmans for the people that they were and the legacy that they will leave behind. Anyone who knew Melissa and Mark knew that together they were a force for good. Melissa was a dedicated public servant, and both she and her husband devoted their lives to improving the lives of Minnesotans. Personally, Melissa and I shared a love of golden retrievers. We often exchanged stories and photos of our beloveds. She adored her golden retriever, Gilbert, and he adored her. Professionally, I had the privilege of working with Melissa over the years and watching her excel as Speaker of the Minnesota House. I'd always admired her work and her ability to work across the aisle, make tough decisions when she needed to. She was a true leader, and she led by example. Recently, Melissa had to take a vote, a tough vote that she personally didn't agree with, but it was the best deal she could get. In my last conversation with her, I told her that I was proud of her leadership. Standing here today, I'm so glad that I did. It's still difficult to comprehend the violent attacks on the Hortmans and Hoffmans, but what I do know is that we got here in part because of our divisive rhetoric that we have allowed to seep into our politics and into our communities. It will take our entire community coming together. We must hold ourselves and each other accountable. It's the only way forward, and it's how we honor the legacy of Melissa and Mark. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Ranking Member Craig, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member McGovern. The more the American people learn about this big, ugly bill, and it's nearly $200 billion in cuts to food assistance, the less they like it. I honestly don't know how a single one of my colleagues could vote for this bill. 17 million Americans lose their health insurance or lose their health care. Millions and millions of people across our country are going to lose access to food assistance. You know, most Americans don't even know this yet in our country, but I promise you they will. A recent Fox News poll found that 59% of voters oppose this bill. The American people are not buying what the Republicans are selling, even on Fox News. The American people, like House Democrats, want to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse. This bill doesn't reduce waste, fraud, or abuse. It gives government-sponsored tax breaks to the wealthiest among us, and you pay for it by taking food and health care away from seniors, children, veterans, and people with disabilities. And it isn't even paid for. It adds nearly $4 trillion to the national debt. So much for fiscal responsibility here. The American people, including Minnesotans, know the cost of living is too high. This bill does not lower the cost of living. It makes meeting the basic needs like groceries and accessing medical care more expensive. I promise you this bill will raise health care costs for everyone. The American people want efficient and effective governance. This bill doesn't do anything to improve good governance. It makes it worse by pushing billions in new expenses onto state and county governments, forcing our state and local governments into a position where they have to decide between taking food away from their friends and neighbors or slashing other local services or raising taxes. And I mean that in 10 states across this country. Folks are going to have to look at raising county taxes in order to pay for the administration and perhaps even the benefit of cutting food assistance. In Minnesota alone, where the burden for SNAP cuts will fall to the counties, the Association of Minnesota Counties projects they'll have to raise property taxes by an average of more than 5% to pay for it, and by even more in some counties. Many of you sitting here today do not even know the effect that this bill will have on your counties. Republicans have managed to do almost the impossible. Miraculously, you've created a bill that takes food and health care away from millions of Americans in a way that does not save taxpayer dollars, but instead adds trillions of dollars to the national debt. Minnesotans and Americans in every corner of this country are asking, how is any of this actually possible? It's simple. You've picked tax breaks for large corporations and ultra-wealthy people in our country over hardworking families. Republicans are selling the American people down the river. This bill sells out our farmers and the families they feed. Of course, we need all the elements of a farm bill. Mr. Chairman talked about the elements in this bill. We should be doing this in a farm bill, a full 5-year farm bill with 12 bipartisan titles. It sells out the hopes and dreams of millions of Americans struggling to keep food on the table. It sells out more than 300 rural hospitals that are at risk of closing due to Medicaid cuts. It also cuts hundreds of billions of dollars from SNAP, our most effective anti-hunger program, by taking $6 a day out of the pockets of vulnerable seniors, veterans, children, and people with disabilities, and putting that money back into the pockets of billionaires. Taking food away from the people who need it forces seniors to choose between having a meal and paying for medicine. And let me just say this, because we were in committee for over 20 hours. And over I heard my Republican colleagues talking about that this activity would not cut access to veterans' nutrition benefits. This is exactly what the Senate version does, and many of you don't even know what this version says. We had 1 hour to come into this room. Many veterans, as we know, suffer from behavioral or physical health issues connected to their service. 1 in 3 working-age veterans with disabilities aren't sure where their next meal will come from. 1 in 4 working-age veterans who can't find work are food insecure. Our veterans can't pay for meals with Support the Troops bumper stickers, and they can't eat thoughts and prayers. And it doesn't stop there. This bill takes food away from former foster youth, leaving the foster care system, who may not have the same level of support from families that many of us benefited from when we were just starting to make our way in the world as 18 or 19-year-olds. I just don't understand where these values are coming from. The American people are right not to trust this bill. The bill doesn't save us a cent. It adds to the debt. If passed, it will pass millions and millions along to the nation. This bill was a disgrace when it left this chamber. Most of you haven't read it to know that it's even more of a disgrace now that it's back. And folks, this is one of the worst mistakes anyone who votes yes for will make in your political career. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee, Ms. Craig.
Gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Republican budget is a betrayal of the American people. It puts in jeopardy food assistance for 42 million Americans. That's children, seniors, the disabled, and working parents. 1.2 million veterans rely on SNAP for their food. This budget turns their back on them. 270,000 veterans, homeless, and former foster youth will lose their food assistance entirely. The vulnerable are left behind. The middle class gets screwed in favor of the ultra-wealthy. I'm a hell no, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Texas recognized.
Speaker,
Back now recognize the gentlelady from Minnesota, our distinguished ranking member, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Witherby, I'm concerned that reduced funding and support for research is going to have serious downstream effects on new products and the private sector. You noted in your testimony that you worked with various land-grant institutions, including the great University of Minnesota. How do these research partnerships work, and how does public funding for research help to catalyze development of innovative private sector products?
Yeah, thank you. Previously, like a lot of these land-grant universities, the professors there are, tabbed within the state to look at different technologies for their growers within the state. Part of the funding comes from either their ability to apply to the government for grants or the university for grants. That money coming obviously from what had been funded towards, research and science. The other part of it comes from companies like us. And so, as I mentioned before, part of our innovation of getting products through and showing proof is that, we need to attract investors, and investors look at track record and look at how well you've been able to get your product tested and move forward through regulatory approvals. That's all kind of in a tough state when part of the university funding is held up or from the government based on some of this. And a lot of it is important pieces. Very similarly, we had talked a little bit about funding towards spotted wing Drosophila, but it's also for New World screwworm, very similar. Something that now is important to protect not just for berries, but also now cattle and other things. And so these technologies getting tested and approved at some of these universities is really important for preparedness and to be ready to deploy commercially.
Thank you so much. Mr. Abbott, in your testimony, you noted that Congress has fallen short of the minimum funding level that is set for OPP. You also said that a well-funded OPP benefits everyone. I completely agree. Are you concerned that recent staff reductions at EPA will lead to greater delays in product approval? And do these cuts, coupled with the anti-science rhetoric coming from Secretary Kennedy, create a healthy business environment?
The way I understand it, I believe Lee Zeldin is moving the parts around. He's taking one over, because you're talking EPA in general. I'm focused more on the OPP side of things, where the backlog is, and that's what's important to us. So I believe as long as we can continue to move staffing and full fund the staffing there, that's where we're going to unstick the drain, if you will, right? That's where the holdup is on our constituents over here on the post-patent, as well as the multinationals. We're all affected by it.
And the consequences, if we aren't able to fully fund and that gets slowed down?
The consequences are the farmers in general. They're the ones that pay, right? Who's using the chemistries out there right now? If I go back in my career, and I've been at this for about 29, 30 years, a lot of the chemistries that I started out in my career are no longer there. And that's a good thing, because some of them needed to go by the wayside. We have new innovation, new greener chemistries, and it's all around public safety and stewardship and environmental stewardship. So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, is it your understanding that family farmers across this country are committed to good environmental stewardship? I'm not sure, is environmental a banned word or not? I'm going to just...
No, having been boots on the ground and actually talking with and working with farmers for most of my career, it's not a bad word. They understand it, and they were here. They understand if they don't take care of their land, they won't have it. So they really need to take care of it and steward it so it continues to produce.
That's certainly been my experience with Minnesota farmers. There's no group of people more committed to the land and good environmental stewardship than family farmers across this nation. So thank you so much, Mr. Abbott, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Before we adjourn today, I invite the ranking member to share any closing comments that she might have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Throughout this hearing, we've heard about innovations that are primed to come to the market and help farmers use the tools that are available to them to grow crops more efficiently. For farmers to continue their progress and for industry to thrive, we do need a fully staffed Environmental Protection Agency. For companies to have regulatory certainty and remain viable, they need to have their products reviewed in a timely manner. Reducing the number of scientists at the EPA doesn't change the regulatory system. It just leads to worse customer service and longer wait times. There's certainly room for reform in our regulatory system, but those reforms should make the system work better, not worse. For the past 100 years, we have seen immense progress in food safety and food production efficiency. These two things can and should go hand in hand. But the MAHA Commission is headed the opposite direction. They're advocating for change that makes our food supply less safe and makes it harder for farmers to do their jobs. I hope that we can keep the information we heard today in mind and that the testimony of the witnesses will give us the courage to hold the administration accountable when they begin to degrade our food safety system or undercut our farmers. None of this is about ideology. It's about doing the right thing for our farmers. It's about ensuring government and private sector partnerships that work together based on sound science. I think the future remains bright for America's farmers and biotechnology innovation, so long as we can keep the crackpots and the conspiracy theorists from hijacking our nation's public health and food policy. Thank you, and I yield back.
I'd now like to welcome the distinguished ranking member, the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Craig, for any opening remarks that she would like to give.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. American farms are among the most productive on earth, enabling our farmers to feed the country and the world. They take responsibility seriously for this, just as seriously as their commitment to farm using methods that keep their neighbors, consumers, and the environment safe. Today, I'm excited that we get to focus on and learn about how cutting-edge biotechnology, tried and true crop production techniques, and sound policy equip our farmers with the tools they need to continue feeding America's families. To maintain a high-quality food production system, we need a regulatory framework that's transparent and based on sound science. The moment we begin to stray from these principles is the moment that trust in our food system begins to deteriorate. That is why I'm concerned with so many of the comments and actions coming out of the current administration that seem designed to undermine people's confidence in our regulatory system, attack innovation taking place on our farms, and make it harder for family farmers to do their jobs. Take, for example, the MAHA Commission report, which was riddled with errors and cited non-existent studies. Errors and misinformation like these have consequences. It undermines Americans' trust in the food we eat and attacks farmers for the work that they do. Secretary Kennedy's disregard for science and perversion of facts and data are dangerous, erodes confidence in our public health and regulatory systems, and dissuades talented scientists from joining the civil service. The Environmental Protection Agency has also begun to move backward with the haphazard firing of technical staff and scientists responsible for properly assessing new chemicals and technologies and their impact on our people, food, and the environment. This work requires talented toxicologists, chemists, and other scientists who collaborate with industry and advocacy groups to protect the environment while ensuring farmers have access to the tools they need. This uncertainty isn't just bad for the agency and American citizens that rely on the government to protect their health and the environment, it's bad for business. Innovative products that could have come to market will be stalled in the pipeline as review times get even worse. American scientists and farmers have unlocked the building blocks of many plants, discovering how to make crops more resilient to drought, increase production yields, and reduce resource consumption. defunding fundamental science research, and firing the civil servants and scientists who work with private companies and farmers to bring technological advancements and new crop tools to market will put us further behind as countries like Brazil, India, and China increase the size and scope of their research programs. We all want science-based regulatory decisions and policy, which is why I urge my colleagues to oppose any further defunding and termination of our research programs and scientists, and rather look for opportunities to invest in these efforts and people, which we all agree are critical to the future of farm country. We have before us an impressive panel of witnesses, all of whom have extensive experience in how to effectively use crop protection tools and use groundbreaking technology to bring new and innovative products to market. As we start to move toward reauthorization of the Pesticide Registration Improvement Act, testimony like yours can help to inform us of what improvements and changes might be made. So thank you so much for being here again. To our witnesses, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Craig is organized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I want to take just a moment for a moment of personal privilege as well to welcome Farm Aid to Minnesota on Saturday. So we're looking forward to that, every single one of us in Minnesota. I have a few questions today, so I'm going to get right to it. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I remain increasingly concerned with healthcare access in our country, and of course, especially in rural America. In the state of Minnesota, just a couple of weeks ago, we're seeing health clinics and hospitals start to close. 6 southeast Minnesota clinics are closing by the end of the year due to rising cost and staffing shortages. These local clinics are the very institutions serving our nation's farmers who work stressful, high-risk jobs to feed and fuel our nation. There are estimates that the Republican reconciliation package will close hundreds of rural hospitals, approximately 700, in fact, across the country. Can anyone on the panel tell me a little bit more about USDA rural development programs that my constituents can look to in order to reinstitute and improve upon rural health care access? Representative Torres Small?
Thanks so much, Ranking Member Craig. When I think about hospitals across rural America, there was COVID-era funding that was fundamental to saving hospitals. They provided direct assistance to lending that saved rural hospitals from closing their doors. Also, when you look at community facilities, that's something that rural hospitals rely on to be able to expand and provide services that are needed, but also I visited one hospital in North Dakota that opened their doors to then rent out space for others, and that helped them pay back the loan. The problem is that most of community facilities funding is loans, and especially as hospitals face the dire impacts of Medicaid cuts, they're not going to have the resources for those loans.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Heimel, I know in your testimony you actually said rural health care in your region is approaching a full-blown crisis. Can you just elaborate on that?
I'd be happy to. I'll give you an anecdote. We have a UPMC hospital that serves Potter and surrounding counties. Recently, for various factors, they had to close maternity services there, childbirthing services. We now have a 7-county maternity desert in north central Pennsylvania. There's not one facility within the 7 counties that can provide the birthing services and maternity care. That's a concern. That same hospital very recently announced it's going to close its long-term care, its nursing home. And the residents there are going to move to another facility. People are quick to say, oh, that's a pattern. It's going to be the dominoes falling, and next thing you know, we won't have a hospital. I'm not trying to go there. I'm trying to point out that the investment in rural health care is extremely important. Down the road, 90 miles from our county, through the Community Facilities Program, a significant grant came to Jefferson County in Punxsutawney from the old Groundhog Day community. They were able to basically save their hospital there through the Community Facilities Program. They renovated a building into 2 different units and were able to put a new emergency department in that hospital through this program. So it's a deep, deep concern, a very, very high priority in our region and I'm sure other places.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And I'm going to go back to Representative Torres Small. I mean, this has been a really rough 9 months in rural communities with high input costs, low commodities prices, with trade wars, Medicaid cuts, SNAP cuts. There's been a lot, and my family farmers and others are telling me that this is devastating. How would you describe the impact? What are you seeing that this administration's policies have had or will have on rural communities?
Thank you for your attention to rural communities in the wake of these impacts, Ranking Member Craig, because it's going to be significant. Whether that's the $155 billion of lost spending to rural hospitals because of the cuts to Medicaid, or whether it's families that are facing a double whammy of SNAP cuts on top of an uncertain economy, or if it's stranded soybeans in the Midwest because of the tariff war, the collateral damage of that. We're facing real uncertainty in rural America, and that's why your attention is so crucial to make sure that this committee works together to support rural America.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Let me turn it over now to the really indefatigable and will be chair of the not appropriations, of the Authorization Committee, Angie Craig from Minnesota.
Well, thank you so much, Rosa, and thank you, Leader Jeffries. We are here today because President Trump and Secretary Brooke Rollins have chosen to take food away from 42 million Americans. Instead of coming to the table and working with Democrats to find a way to protect Americans from losing their health care, their health insurance premiums increasing dramatically, or both, the Trump administration has chosen to use the security of food in our country as a bargaining chip in a government shutdown. The president can't even be bothered to be in the country while Americans line up at food shelves across our nation. 440,000 Minnesotans alone need access to the SNAP program. The Trump administration has the appropriated funds and legal authority to fully fund SNAP in November, plain and simple. They are refusing to follow the law, and they are cutting food assistance when there are ample funds available, over $5 billion in the SNAP contingency fund, and they have the legal statutory transfer authority to fund the rest. If the president wanted to help feed hungry Americans, he would. He's shown us that. He does whatever the hell he wants to, whether it's legal or not. This is not only legal, but it is the right thing to do. But his actions have shown a callous disregard for America's seniors, veterans, and families with children. Earlier this year, he canceled food orders to food banks, stopping $500 million worth of food from reaching people in need. Food that our family farmers across this nation have grown. Food that they counted on being able to sell to the nation's food banks. The Republicans' one and only priority this Congress has been the big ugly bill, which not only cut health care by $1 trillion, but also cut SNAP by $186 billion, a frontal assault on our most effective basic need food assistance program to help vulnerable members of our community who rely on it to keep food on the table. Now the administration is taking food away from 16 million children, 8 million seniors, and 1.2 million veterans. Their hands are not tied. Their hands are not tied. The law is clear. The law is as clear as this administration's cruelty is as clear. The law is as unambiguous as congressional Republicans' desire to let the ACA tax credits expire. It is unconscionable. It is egregious, and it is illegal. I'm calling on the president to do the right thing and the moral thing, which coincidentally offers him a chance to do something he rarely does, which is follow the law. I'm calling on my Republican colleagues to speak up to your friends in this administration and at the USDA and deliver a simple message. They have the money and the authority to fund SNAP. Hungry Americans are not poker chips. Their health and well-being are not to be gambled with. And I so appreciate the attorneys generals from across this nation, including my own Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, for standing up to this administration earlier today. Stop playing politics with America's hungry children, veterans, the disabled, seniors. Get back to the negotiating table. Open up the government and fund SNAP in November. Thank you.
Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Republicans have said that the easiest way to fund SNAP is to reopen the government. And you say that Democrats want to reopen the government. Why not call on your Senate colleagues, your Senate Democratic colleagues, to reopen the government and alleviate all the impacts of the shutdown, and then immediately dive headfirst into solving this healthcare crisis? All hands on deck.
As has been the case, and as Angie Craig and Rosa DeLauro, who I'll yield to momentarily, have repeatedly said, the funds have already been allocated by the Congress in a bipartisan way to allow a continuation of SNAP benefits through November 1st, deep into the month of November, and there's additional funds that are available to be reallocated so that not a single person in this country goes hungry. And if that happens beginning on November 1st, it's because Donald Trump and Republicans want the American people to go hungry. And that's the problem that we confront.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and that's exactly what the lawsuit that was filed across this country by 23 states, District of Columbia, others, says that they have an absolute legal responsibility to use the contingency fund to fund SNAP. That we have never seen a lapse in funding of SNAP during a government shutdown previously. And they also have the authority, Secretary Brooke Rollins, to move additional money over to make sure that not a single child in this country goes hungry. They are ignoring their legal responsibility. They are ignoring the moral clarity that we have, that there is no way we should be allowing seniors and veterans and children to go hungry in this country. And where are they? The president is in Japan, trying to get people to buy foreign cars. Last week, he was trying to get people to buy Argentine beef. This is not an America First administration. These are not America First policies on behalf of this administration. And what people really care about in Minnesota and across this country is what's happening in their own budgets. And what's happening in their own budgets is that this president's trade wars, attacks on family farmers by decimating the farm economy, is causing farm bankruptcies to dramatically increase across our country. And look, it's a slap in the face to family farmers. Without those farmers, we will not have food security in this country, and this administration needs to step up and do the right thing.
By the way, supplemental nutrition assistance program. We just don't sit here and say, okay, we're going to pass this law today, and Democrats and Republicans are going to agree to that, and the president signs it into law, and then we say, oh, hey, did we really mean to do that? And just to ignore that, which is what is happening. It is in the law. And they are violating the law because they don't have the political will to do it. Because, you know why? Because what they want to do is, as Secretary Rollins did this afternoon on TV, is to say that the Democrats are responsible for taking food out of the mouths of children, or some other, quite honestly, cockamamie excuse that she might have for not following what the law of the land is. But it is, quite frankly, starting with January, There's been an unbelievable violation of the Constitution and the laws of this nation with this administration. But you know, let's stand our ground and let the people know that the money is there. They need to wave their magic wand, and the money will go out, and in short order, we'll be able to get 42 million people fed in the way that the food stamp program has done from its outset.
Let me thank Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro and Congresswoman Angie Craig for their continued leadership. Thank you.
Colleague Angie Craig from the heartland of America, Minnesota, and ranking member of the Agricultural Committee.
Thank you so much, Debbie. This weekend, many of us witnessed our neighbors standing at pop-up food banks across our communities. People who are on the SNAP program who did not have access to their benefits because of this administration. Today, the president, in a cruel, heartless social media post, told those same people that they don't matter enough to him to even obey the law. These are single mothers, 16 million children. These are seniors, 8 million of them in our country. These are veterans who served and were willing to die for our nation. This was one of the most cruel acts that I have ever witnessed from a heartless president and a heartless administration. He said it on social media as if this was a completely normal thing to do. But he said the quiet part out loud. He's using food assistance for political leverage. Let me be crystal clear. This president is not a king. America has told him that. He does not choose whether he follows the law. He does not get to choose whether he follows court orders. Just as American seniors and children, the disabled and veterans who bravely served our country do not get to choose to suffer hunger in their own communities. The Trump administration must comply with the court order to partially fund SNAP. But even more egregious is that this administration has the opportunity to immediately fund all of it, and they are actively choosing not to do so. Those benefits could go out within 24 hours if the administration had not made this so difficult for the American people. What are we doing, folks? Where are we? 2 judges said fund SNAP. And this president wakes up on a Tuesday morning when his administration is about to get thrashed in elections across this country. And if you think we are not pissed off at this president, at this administration, for withholding food from hungry people. Now, I'm only supposed to have 1 or 2 minutes, but as the ranking member of the Ag Committee, I'm going to take a little privilege and say that little show by the Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins on Friday in this hallowed ground of the Capitol was disgusting. To call people who are on SNAP, who need a little food assistance, corrupt, to call out a program that has actually one of the lowest fraud rates in this federal government, 1.6%, that is disingenuous. That is corrupt. People are hungry right now, today. They don't know where their next meal is coming. We are here as Democrats. We are showing up. And where are they? My Republican colleagues complicit. Complicit, rooting him on from the sidelines while they're on vacation. My Republican colleagues, it's long past time to stand up to this lawless, heartless administration.
Of the House of Representatives Agriculture Committee, Representative Angie Craig.
Thank you so much, Senator Lujan, for bringing us all here today on a bicameral basis. The $187 billion cut to SNAP benefits that my colleagues describe are absolutely staggering. And make no mistake about it, the entire intention of those cuts is to kick people off the program and to shift those costs to the states
which Minnesotans are starting to understand is going to increase their property taxes. Because in 10 states across this country, it's the counties who have to fund both the administrative and the actual cost of SNAP. The paperwork, the red tape, the hoops that Republicans want to make hungry families and seniors jump through just to secure $2 to help cover the cost of a meal during one of the greatest affordability crisis in our country as it relates to food cost is absolutely egregious. By cutting the heart out of SNAP, that wasn't good enough for President Trump or his administration. And that is truly terrifying, truly horrifying, and frankly, it pisses me the hell off. If I see Secretary Rollins one more time on TV, creating more anxiety for poor Americans when they are helped by $6.20 at a time when no one can afford their groceries. Just think about what Americans are about to experience over the Thanksgiving holidays as they go to their local grocery store to try to put the family Thanksgiving meal together. At the same time, they're opening their portal on their health care account and looking at their health care premiums going up dramatically. During the longest government shutdown in history, President Trump and Secretary Rollins chose to illegally withhold food assistance from 42 million Americans, including 16 million children. Think about what kind of heartless person you would have to be to withhold food from 16 million children. Our community stepped forward to try to close just a little bit of that gap, but it's absolutely disgusting, and they show for sure who they are. At the same time, Secretary Rollins goes on TV and talks about all the fraud. Folks, this most effective anti-hunger program in our history has a fraud rate of 1.6%. It's actually one of the most effective, well-run programs in the country. And by the way, folks, guess who runs it? Our states. Our states run it. And when they make mistakes in error rates, you know what happens? They have to pay a fine and create revenue to the federal government. You know what else? There are already work requirements in SNAP. The bullshit this administration is peddling is egregious. When congressional Democrats, 26 attorneys general, and 2 federal courts said they needed to help feed America, the Trump administration appealed it all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, Secretary Rollins has launched a national propaganda campaign, and I'm telling you this, I'm fighting her propaganda every step of the way. And I'm warning my Republican colleagues, if you bring your propaganda to the Ag Committee, when we start getting back on the House side, every single lie that you tell while your mouth is moving, I am going to call it out. We need Republicans to show just a little bit of compassion. If not for people, how about the affordability crisis in this country? How about they realize that their own constituents can't afford their grocery cost? They can't afford their health care cost. We need to make sure that America's hungry can afford food. Thank you.
Yes, Jerry Hagstrom from the Hagstrom Report. I'm wondering if one of you could tell us what's really going on in the states. Secretary Rollins said that the One Big Beautiful Bill provisions should go into effect on November 1st. Can you provide any enlightenment as to how this is actually working with the states, what the state agencies are doing at this point?
Do you want to touch on that, Angie?
I can do that. Yeah, I was just in Washington County, one of the counties in my congressional district, about a week ago, and where the SNAP program is actually administered at the county level. And Jerry, what they're having to do is go back through every single recipient and look at you know, I'll give you a couple of examples of the big, beautiful bill changes. Does that individual have children who are younger than 14 years old? Because if they do, they can stay on the program without work requirements. If they don't have children 14 and younger, then they are now subject to the work requirements in the bill. And remember, the House version put the child's age at 7 years old. So House Republicans were going to send single mothers with 8-year-olds back to work, and we're going to let them have to figure out, do I take my $6.20 a day for my child to get them help for food, or am I going to have some sort of health care, child care crisis? It's absolutely stunning. The other change was they raised the age for work requirements in the bill. So literally, from a state level, they are causing so much red tape, burdensome work. And keep in mind, no one who is able-bodied today can stay on the SNAP program for longer than 3 months. This is ridiculous. There are work requirements already. Able-bodied adults can only be on the program for 3 months for a certain period of time. They're already, it is one of the actual most well-designed programs. And remember, the goal is to get people off SNAP in the end. So if that's Republicans' goal, to get them off the SNAP program, to drive them off with all these new requirements, how about they just raise the damn minimum wage and index it to inflation? If you want people off SNAP, how about you help improve their lives so they don't need government assistance? That is not the Republican Party that we're dealing with here.
There's a lot of things that are going on in the states as they scramble to respond to H.R. 1. They are working very hard to improve error rates, which I think were mentioned earlier. That are not fraud. They're mistakes that are being made in the processing of applications, and, you know, complicated measure, but it's not what people often think it is. But so states are working to improve their systems, to reduce their error rates, to scramble to try and reduce what their additional benefit costs are going to be when this kicks in October 2027. But the administrative costs shift, which is shifting the costs of administrative costs up to 75% for states. It was 50%, is leading to lots of tough conversations across the country in state legislatures about how they're going to fund those additional costs. States have been directed by USDA to start implementing the time limit. So as Congresswoman Craig said, states are figuring out who is now beholden to those time limits and starting to communicate that, and they could lose their benefits within the next couple of months. So there is a lot happening with the states. There's a lot of pressure there, and the states, you know, are just recovering from all the chaos that we had during the shutdown when benefits were withheld.
And then, Jerry, just one last thing there. Look, as you take a step away from that question, remember that document that President Trump once denied existed called Project 2025? Now he talks about it a bit. Two of the architects of that document who had their own think tanks, Russ Vought and Brooke Rollins, are now in the administration, one running OMB, ignoring the law, ignoring the Constitution, and the other at the United States Department of Agriculture. In that document, they targeted SNAP. They went after provisions in that. And so they said out loud what they were going to do, and now we're seeing the devastation. Make no mistake what they've been up to with these cruel choices. And it started with these think tanks as well.